You're listening to the Weird Reader Podcast, an extension of Jason's Weird Reads, found on YouTube. Welcome. Hello, everybody. First of all, welcome to episode 49 of the Weird Reads Podcast. I'm Jason White, and today I have a real exciting guest. I was thinking for a long time of how I could get this person on to my channel and just discuss something with her, and it kind of hit me recently. I could talk to her about vampires because we both love vampires. And this is Karen from MK Oldman, her TikTok channel. I highly recommend everyone go and check out her channel there and to follow her there. And like I said, we've talked on TikTok here and there, and once it was about vampires. I remember, actually maybe even twice. And I encourage people to go and check you out. So thank you for coming on and talking about vampires with me, Karen.
Thanks for having me. You picked one of my hyper focuses, so.
So can you tell us about your TikTok channel and how you came about starting making videos there?
That was I had actually stopped watching horror when my son was really little because he's autistic, and so I didn't want him to run into a scene and get scared, not be able to ask questions, and I didn't realize it, but I stopped reading at the same time. If it was, he doesn't care, but it just happened. And I realized it one day, and then I was behind on horror, looked at Facebook, saw a couple of random TikTok videos, and figured out BookTok was where the reviews I was looking for were. And then I just needed to get used to my voice. My first couple of videos, I use one of those voice masking things. So
yeah,
I've just stayed ever since. The short video format works for me.
Did you ever watch BookTube channels on YouTube at all?
I didn't find them until after TikTok, so they're still. I know there's a lot of them that I've subscribed to, but I haven't really watched.
Yeah, I have a weird history with TikTok because I was kind of prejudiced against TikTok when I first went over there. I thought it was just dancing teenagers and funny goat videos, which actually I still like watching those, the goat videos and the cats and whatnot. But when I found BookTok, that really changed my world.
Yeah, that's what got me to go from, oh, look, well, it's better that the kids are dancing weird in the street than some of the other stuff they could be doing, to, what do you mean this is where the books are?
Yeah. You read a lot of splatter and extreme horror, right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily exclusively a favorite, but I think I must have been born somewhat desensitized, because people would just be like, oh my God, it was so much. Even when I was little, I grew up on horror. I was allowed to watch anything but MTV. And, I don't know what MTV had that bugged my mom compared to some of the movies that I could watch, but I'd just be like, well, why does that bother you? So somewhere around 99, 2000, you remember in the old paperbacks, they'd have the mail away thing. You could do a book of the month.
Oh, yeah.
We did that to try to find new horror authors because the bookstores still weren't genreified. And the first book we got was Richard Lehman. And my tiny, quiet mom read it, lost her mind. She reads unbelievably fast and was just like, Karen Jean, you have to read this. I went through it in a day, and we just started hunting down Lehman.
What is it about this type of horror that draws you to it?
With me, it's mostly when I want to be distracted and read, because I'll get really sucked in, and it tends to be so over the top that I have fairly bad anxiety, and that can't really break through the, oh my God, did they just say what? So It's good for that, but the same time, if you trigger easily, there's a reason I always tell people, feel free to ask me if there's something specific.
Yeah. What's like the most disgust? We'll get to the vampires in a minute, but what would you say is the most disgusting, over the top book you've read?
Oh, I don't even know. I know the only one that's made me gag was actually a vampire book, and it's weird because I know I've read worse by the same author. That was Bloodsuck by Judith Sonnet,
Mm.
and it's three sisters that are vampires, and it's a very kind of white trash aesthetic going on, and they make snuff films. And you can make a better snuff film when you can make the victim unkillable for a little while. So they do some really crazy things. And there was just this sequence of events that hit the right way that I actually had to put the book down and walk away for a minute. Um,
Judith Sonnet's
yeah,
good for that, though, right?
yeah, yeah. She's getting into quieter stuff now, but
Yeah.
also with her, most of the time I end up somehow really attached to a character too. It's not like she's definitely splatter and not extreme. It's not like shock value only.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here today to talk about vampires because we both have a love of vampires. And so I was wondering, what was your origin story? Where did you start consuming vampire, either fiction or movies?
Movies first. That my mom. It's got to be. I think Salem's Lot 1979 was the first one I ever saw,
Nice.
and that's still a favorite. I watched the recent remake. I didn't hate it. I
Mm.
thought I was gonna hate it. I didn't hate it, but
That's interesting because I
I
watched that too, and I didn't hate it either, but so many people did hate it. I just don't think I think it's a good movie on its own, but it's not exactly a great representation of the novel itself. That's the way I felt.
yeah, we did that. The Lost Boys around the same time, and then I was a Count Duckula kid. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, yeah.
I actually recently binge watched it on YouTube, trying to get my little one to watch, and he's just like, I don't know what this annoying thing is, Mom. Walks away. But my mom always liked them, and she liked a lot of they're all just one giant blur to me now, but a lot of the, is it the Hammer films?
Mm-hmm.
It's like Christopher Lee,
Yeah.
and it just went from there. I, way too young, watched Vamp. They had it in a video store, and I drove my mother crazy for like a year and a half to rent it. And she finally broke down, and I absolutely did not need to see it that young. And it was a favorite for like a month.
Yeah. Did you like continuously watch it?
Yeah, yeah, there were signs that I was neurodivergent that we see now, but then I was just annoying. That one got watched on a loop.
Yeah. I remember when I was a kid, they used to play those old Dracula films on Sunday afternoons. Um, and I don't know why they did that on Sunday. It almost seems blasphemous back then, right? But I just remember them being on the TV in the background while we had family over eating dinner, and seeing Dracula melt at the end was always fun. There's always those old Hammer films with Christopher Lee, and then I went and saw Lost Boys at the theater, and I was in that. That's the movie that made me fall in love with vampires. I was just like, wow,
Yeah, Lost Boys was a big one for me too.
Yeah, and both the Fright Night films, parts 1 and 2. I have you watched those ones?
Yeah, I don't remember the second one as well. I need to rewatch it. Fright Night is like an all-time favorite, though.
Yeah. If you like what I'm doing here and want to support the channel without involving any money on your part, you can do so by sharing the podcast on social media. You can also write a review on Apple Podcasts or rate the show on Spotify. I can't stress enough to you how much I would appreciate that alone. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts or rate the show on Spotify, as I just said. Each and every way you can help out the channel and podcast grow would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. What do you think draws you to vampires? Are there elements that vampires have that draw you to them?
You know, when I originally got into them, I've always loved horror, but they're kind of a perfect predator in that unless you write them a certain way, we can't tell that they're not one of us.
Mm-hmm.
So they can just mix in. But once I realized, like, it wasn't always just Dracula, and they could be really feral, they could be scheming. You can have head vampires with really feral things. Some of them can turn to bats or mists. Some of them can't. That's what originally kept me with it. Was I think there was some level of comfort in the monster, but you could always make it different, and I am very novelty seeking.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever fall into like the Twilight stuff at all?
I got attacked with the Twilight stuff. So I don't know, I was like mid to late 20s when that got huge, or at least when I noticed that it got huge. And I had friends that were like, you like to read, you love vampires, you have to read this, it's the best thing ever. Nobody told me it wasn't actually horror. Nobody told me anything. They drove me crazy. I read the first book, took me like 5 weeks to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And then I pushed through the second book out of like sheer force of will, and I gave up. And I hate Bella. I hated being in Bella's head so much.
Yeah.
And then when the movies came out and I could like watch them on demand or streaming or whatever, I watched them thinking I won't be in her head as much. They're not going to do a constant voiceover. No, it still didn't work for me.
Yeah. I remember Stephen King was quoted to saying that is it Stephanie Meyer who wrote that?
Meyer, I think.
Yeah, he said that she couldn't write worth a shit. And once he said that, I was like, okay, I'm curious. And so I went and I read the first book. And surprisingly, I didn't hate it, but I could see maybe why there was so much hate towards it. And then I watched the movie, and it wasn't bad either. But then I was on a plane ride, and the second movie was on. So I was like, you know what? I'll sit down and watch that, see if I like it too. And I hated that movie. That movie was that was awful. Like,
yeah, I'm like, some of I can get past. I mean, I make a lot of jokes about I don't want sparkly vampires, but like, I appreciate she came up with a different reason why they don't go out in the sun.
yeah.
I can get through a lot of stuff, but I really like that they got to take Bella out of that for me to be able to.
Yeah.
It's like constant whining and, oh, let me just jump off this cliff to get their attention.
Yeah, it's like such terrible representation.
Yeah.
Also, I agree with you about the vampires being glittery. It's an interesting concept because they they glitter in order to attract people, and that's how they feed. I always found that kind of clever, but
yeah, I do have a friend that would definitely work on.
If we could all glitter, that would be great, right?
No, we have an anti-glitter rule in this house. There's enough slime and sand.
Hey, I know what you mean. Glitter, like the actual glitter, is awful. I hate it. It gets everywhere. Do you have a favorite vampire character that you return to?
Oh, that seems to go with mood, but it's funny. I love Lestat.
Yeah.
And when I read Interview, I did not. I hated him.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And then I read the rest of them, and I'm like, Louis does a lot of whining.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, that might be my problem. I think I just don't like whiny vampires.
He's not as bad as Armand, though. Armand the vampire, he is such a whiny baby and a passive-aggressive, sort of menacing, evil entity.
It's like, oh, that's it. I'm having feelings. I'm going to go walk into the sun now.
Yeah, every 2 minutes, too.
That's one of the. I have to reread that whole series. I had started to, actually around the time I started my TikTok in 2022, And I did Interview again, which this is the time that I realized that she didn't use chapters in that book.
Yeah. They're just like section breaks or whatever, right?
Yeah, I was just like, where are the, because I was buddy reading and we were finally like, we're going to have to pick the end of a scene and just tell each other a page number. And I redid Lestat and then I put it down for a bit. And when we said we were going to do this, I grabbed Memnock on Audible because it had been years, and that is still far and away, like, it's one of my favorite books of all time.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, we got to make sure that's not, we remembered that one pretty clear. But it definitely pointed out to me how much I forgot about the others.
Yeah. Some comments in here. James, he says that he likes the Necroscope series by Brian Lumley. Have you read any of those? I read the first one, but I never really continued because I'm awful with series.
I read the first three, but my mother read most of them. They didn't stick with me that well. And then a few years back, I reread the first one, and I need to start them over because I did not realize how much I'd enjoy it. Like as an adult, me in ninth grade, I was not set for it. But
yeah, I want to read that series through. I don't think I gave it a fair chance when it's not that I didn't like it. I just, I didn't follow through with it.
Yeah, and it's definitely like kind of its time. When I reread it, I was like, oh, we know better than, right? He's writing technology in the 70s like it's futuristic.
Yeah.
I've got to stick with that. But the covers, I don't have them anymore.
Those covers are cool.
Yeah, and they changed them because I think there was talk of turning it into a TV series. And I am so upset. I'm like, I want the original covers, and they're like a white whale to find now.
Yeah, that's true. Also in the comments, W. Smith, he really likes The Strain by Chuck Hogan and Guillermo del Toro. What do you think? Have you read that? I've read the same thing. I read the first one, but I never continued.
I was about halfway through the first one. I have to replace those. But the setup that I did get through, I really liked. Now I'm on the hunt to get a new set of them.
Yeah, I want to reread all those. Well, the first one, and then finish it off. I really like the concept of the plane landing and nobody. It's like everyone in there is dead. That really drew me. And of course, well, it's not that big of a secret that they've all been changed into vampires. Which is a really cool concept. So, do you have I'm going to assume that your favorite type of vampire would be the ghoulish beast that climbs out of the grave at night.
It's funny. Most of my favorite books they're a little bit calmer than that, but I really like feral. Like just completely feral is always the most fun for me to read.
Yeah.
Or when you get where there's like a master vampire and they're fine, and you end up with like, The Lost Boys really was just don't make teenagers vampires, but
yeah, me too.
Where you end up with like a hierarchy of types.
Yeah. I absolutely love the ghoulish feral beast too, like Stephen King's Salem's Lot type vampire. One of the first books I've read, which I forgot to put in any of these, so I'm going to mention it now, is Robert R. McCammon's They Thirst. That was one of the first vampire books I ever read, and it knocked my socks off. Something I got to reread in the future.
Yeah, that's somewhere on the pile to be read. I haven't read yet.
It's pretty. If I remember correctly, it's like Salem's Lot, but set in LA. And it's pretty crazy. But Robert R. McCammon can go into those crazy sort of situations, I think. So, sorry?
No, I was going to say there's Salem's Lot, I think, was the first one I read because my mother collected Stephen King and I would just pull books off of her shelf.
Yeah. So adding to the question I asked about your favorite type of vampire, I was wondering if you have any favorite vampire traits, Like, for example, sunlight burns them to death. Crosses can kill them. Holy water, they don't reflect in a mirror and whatnot.
I typically just like that you can kind of play around with them and mix and match it, as long as, like, once you've set the rules for them in a story, it stays that way, unless there's some reason for it, like, I don't know, some mutation. Um, the mist thing always got me, though, because it was like, if they'd ever been invited, locking the door isn't going to work because they're always going to get in. I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I tried to think about that ahead, and I don't think I have a particular favorite. That's just kind of like, let's see what they're going to do with them this time.
Yeah. I can be particular. I think it's because of how I was introduced to vampires, but if a vampire is out during the day, that annoys me.
I think I remember you saying that once.
Yeah, I don't like that. But it's not like a deal breaker, but I'm not a huge fan of vampires running around in the daytime and not being hurt. And I've kind of, as I've grown older, I've gotten maybe a little more annoyed with religion in vampire fiction, like how crosses and holy water and all that will hurt them. I kind of like the Anne Rice vampire for that because they, as Louis said, I'm quite fond of crosses.
Yep.
I kind of like that sort of approach, and
Yeah. Or
they
there's like, what is it, Jerry Dandridge? Was that his name in Fright Night? And he's like, you have to have faith for that to work on me. That's a
yeah,
rule I can get behind, because,
yeah,
like,
I can get behind that, I
I
guess.
don't have it. I could grab a cross all day, but I'm just gonna be like, I hope they're right.
Yeah, they played around with that in the new Salem's Lot reboot recently too, because well, that's from Salem's Lot as well. The book, you had to have the faith in order for the cross to work.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, just out of curiosity, and it's not important if you have or haven't, but I'm wondering if you've read many of the vampire classics, such as Dracula or Carmilla.
I I read Carmilla 2-ish years ago. I finally got around to it. And Dracula, I actually haven't read since I was like 10. I got it at the Scholastic Book Fair,
Yeah.
read it, and I have a copy that I'm little by little, I pick up like a chapter at a time. I'm barely into it because I have so many books that are like retellings or sequels that I want to get into, that I want to actually read the book. So most of my memory is actually from movies for Dracula.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've read both those examples. There's a couple others that I haven't read, but Dracula I really enjoyed. There's some things that I didn't like about it though. I don't know if I want to go into spoiler territory, 'cause if I were to explain, it might spoil it. But I think I'm gonna anyway, because it's like a over 100-year-old story, right?
1897, there's a reference on my shirt.
But the part that annoyed me is, like, in all the movies, Dracula's badass until the end. But in the book, once they start fighting back, they realize what they have and what they're fighting against. He runs back home with his tail between his legs just to survive, like a scared little animal. It's not terrifying anymore. It would have been more terrifying if he fought right up until the end, I think, anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, which I'll get to. I have to.
So before we get into our honorable mentions, do you have any favorite horror movies, vampire horror movies that you keep returning to?
I made myself a cheat sheet because my memory barely exists.
Oh, I got a cheat sheet too. Yeah, my memory's awful.
Yeah, there's and I have the book. I have to read the book now too. But vampires, John Carpenter did it with the James Woods.
Oh, yeah.
It's like the vampire western. I love that. Lost Boys, Salem's Lot 79, 30 Days of Night was like my thank you for putting really, really feral monsters on the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, where is it? because I keep forgetting the names. At the time, like I went out and saw it in theaters, and I don't know, but it hit the right way. Because Dracula 2000,
Hmm.
I loved that so much. I just rewatched it, and I was like, I still like this, but I don't know what quite had me obsessed then. Although it came out, I was like a 19-year-old girl, so completely different.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's funny. I was trying to remember from when I was a kid. Also, was My Best Friend is a Vampire.
Okay.
Remember that?
Yeah.
And Near Dark.
Near Dark. That movie is brilliant. That movie is on my list too. Um, I absolutely love Near Dark. Also Lost Boys, because that's, like I said, that's the one that floored me. I remember just being like, honestly, that's the movie that made me want to become a vampire myself.
See, I
It's
never.
weird, but because, it's like the vampires were bad in that movie. I don't know why I wanted to become a vampire after that. And
But they made it look good. Like
yeah,
they
they did.
did. Everybody else looked like they were having a real crap time. The vampires were having a good time in that one.
Yeah. And I'm also on board with 30 Days of Night, because that movie is just brutal and it's scary. Those vampires are scary as hell. They're mean, they're nasty, they fight right to the end. And like you said, they're feral. They're just beasts that can talk.
And then they put them in a situation where you're not just trying to survive for 8 or 12 hours.
Yeah. I have one more movie on my list here that I don't know if you've seen, but if you haven't, I recommend it. It's really interesting. It's called Afflicted. It's a found footage movie from 2013.
I haven't actually watched it. I'm gonna write that one down though.
Yeah, it's about two. I think they're a gay couple who go traveling to like some foreign country. I can't remember now. It's like Spain or something, and they get attacked one night. I think. Well, one of them ends up becoming a vampire, and so he starts transforming while they're on their vacation, and it's just horrifying. It's like crazy body horror with like other things going on. It's creepy and it's very well done. I haven't heard when it came out in 2013, everyone was talking about it, but then everyone stopped talking about it like soon after.
Yeah, so for a little while, I remember it was like they seem to always kind of be trending to some degree, and then all of a sudden you'll get these periods where people are like, "No, vampires are old," and
Yeah.
people will refuse to do anything but trash them, and then something happens and they come back, and then there's me just waiting, like as
Yeah.
if I don't have more than a lifetime's worth of backlog. I keep the other side of my shelf is the collection.
Yeah. I think Twilight kind of killed vampires for a while. People got burnt out because they were sick of, I think, that kind of vampire, honestly. But
Yeah,
that's not
they
exactly, the vampire that I'm thinking of when I think of vampires.
yeah, that overlapped with like them turning Vampire Diaries into a show and a few
Yeah,
others
yeah,
too. So
absolutely. Yeah. Did you ever read any of those, like the Vampire Diaries, or
no, that
watch the series?
when I bought that haul of the mass markets, I got two of the. I want to find somebody who would appreciate them. It's like book 1 and 4 or 2 and 4. They're not quite together, but they're the original paperbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'll actually sit through reading them though, but I remember watching. I watched like the first 2 or 3 seasons of it.
Yeah. Was it any good? Because I always wanted to watch it, but at the same time, I'm just like, maybe not.
I just I stumbled on it, and as long as you're not going into it thinking, "Oh, it's horror vampires," it is more. I mean that they'd be killing people and getting brutal here and there, but it is more like urban fantasy vampires.
Yeah.
But it definitely had like a soap opera quality, which when I want to numb out, that's all I want. Just give me a train wreck to watch and be like, "Oh my god, what are they gonna do?"
Yeah. I don't know. I still might watch it at some point. I was a big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the series, and I want to rewatch it now, but I don't know. time, I swear to God, I thought when I start getting older, time would loosen up a little bit, but it seems like my time's just getting tighter and tighter.
Eesh. Yeah, I rewatched the first season of Buffy. My husband, I thought, had seen it because his best friend for years, there was some night of the week they'd all get together and watch Buffy, and I didn't realize he never watched the beginning of it.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, he didn't know that she had a thing for Angel, and I'm just like, oh Lord, I can't handle it. I'm gonna say some things, and if you're not prepared, I
It's funny you mentioned that because it's funny that you introduced Buffy to your husband, because it was my wife who made me watch the show. She was like, "You like horror? You like vampires? You're gonna love this show." And so I was like, "All right, let's do it, I guess." Right? And then I ended up falling in love with it. It's a really good show.
yeah, I avoided it the first like 2 years roundabout that it was out because I really thought that they were going to take the movie and
Oh
manage
yeah,
to destroy it and just make a completely ridiculous thing. And then somebody I know had an episode on, oh no, we have to check this out.
yeah. The movie is actually pretty good. The one before the series
Yep.
with Pee Wee Herman in it. I forget his name right now, but
Oh my God. Oh, that's out of my head now. And Luke
yeah,
Perry. I got to see that in theaters because my friend was a Luke Perry fan and
yeah, Luke Perry. Yeah, he's in that one.
demanded that be her birthday party.
That's such a funny movie. It's ridiculous. It's over the top and ridiculous. I love it. All right, so we're gonna move now into our honorable mentions. I have 4 books here. I think I sent you a list, and then of course our top 3. So how about you? How many books do you have in your honorable mention?
I don't know. I have a pile of books that I might forget the name of, kind of combined.
Yeah,
I tried to come up with a top 3, but it's more
hard,
like
right?
a 4 because I couldn't pick between 2.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I was like, I can't remember anything I've ever read, and I ended up with an entire page.
So, what would you like to name first then?
My all-time favorite's Memnoch the Devil. I listened to it end of February again, and yeah, no, that's the book to beat with me.
Yeah, I love that one too.
And Salem's Lot, which I actually have kind of I guess an honorable mention, but it's not marketed as a reimagining of Salem's Lot, but when I read it, it felt like it, and I really liked it. It was Dark Corner by Brandon Massey.
Dark Corner.
Except it's a little bit more modern because, I mean, it was written well after, and it's more urban, and he did this thing in it that I liked. There's guy goes, he inherits his father's house, and really no dad. Dad was a prolific writer, and he decides to move there for a year and, I don't know, sort out his feelings and whatnot with that. And there's a creepy house that gives him vibes. And the creepy house, there's a naturally born vampire who goes there because somewhere under that is his father buried. So there's these like 2 very mirrored stories happening while you get the small town slowly being taken over by vampires. And it was just a lot of fun.
Who's that by again?
Brandon Massey.
I have to check that out. One book I want to discuss for honorable mentions is, and I have to thank you for, it almost made my top list, but when I went through all the vampire books I've read, I was just like, I just can't do it. But you messaged me on TikTok, and you were like, have you read You Can't Take It With You by Marcus Hawk? And then you went in to say like how good it was, and I was like, you know what? I haven't read it. And so I put it on my TBR immediately, and I read it right around Christmas time. And I have to thank you for suggesting it because that book is incredible.
Yeah, I had high hopes. Like I had put out, I think on my Facebook, that I was looking for more Christmas horror recs because I love Christmas, and bonus points if they happen to have vampires. And he hinted, he's like, I might have a Christmas one coming up.
I might.
And this is like my favorite author. So he says something like that. And my husband clutches his wallet. And then like the next day he answers his own comment. It might have vampires.
Yeah, it
I
might.
literally just walked up and I was like, Marcus Hawk is writing a Christmas vampire horror book. And John's like, I don't get overtime. And he sent me the arc and I read it. And then before I reviewed it, I wanted to double check some detail. And I just read it a second time in like 2 weeks. And I never do that.
Yeah, that's such a good book, and it fits for Christmas too. It has like the Charles Dickens
The Christmas Carol.
Christmas Carol kind of feel to it. I mean, it's very cleverly done. I think you'd have to be familiar with the story to see the connections, but it's so, oh my God, it's such a good book. I love it.
And in the end, he did one of my favorite things. It's funny, you mentioned before, that's the thing that made me want to be a vampire. I have never wanted to be a vampire. I have always looked at them and been like, well, if I stay human enough to feel close to things, I'm going to want to turn everybody.
Yeah.
Because that seems lonely. Or I'm not going to be me anymore and I won't want to be different. And he did that, like that spiral of him looking at what eternity would really look like. I was just like, I'm done. We have to.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, you know, that's a good, interesting story idea. What if somebody who's like a family man or you know, a family woman gets bitten by a vampire or whatever, becomes a vampire, and because she loves her family so much, she wants to convert them into vampirehood. Like getting into the family dynamics when somebody you love and trust turns you into a vampire. That would be interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Maybe we should contact Marcus Hawk.
Oh, I'll torture him to write anything. He's a favorite.
Yeah, you love Mark. I've seen you like with Marcus Hawk clothing and stuff, like because he has like the miracle pin, yeah, and a cooking apron, right?
Yeah, it's the apron. I have a thing for aprons, so that was a gift. Have you read The Miracle Sin yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay, mini spoiler. Somewhere, I don't know, 15 or 16 chapters through the book. I remember it from making comments about it at the time. I ended up throwing it because he gifted me my original copy of it. And I'd had it on a wish list, but it doesn't suggest it in the blurb and it won't like ruin the story. But there's a vampire in that. And by then we had already talked like he also loves Memnock. And I was just like, the son of a bitch knew he sent me a vampire book and didn't say it.
Yeah. Yeah, that I was going to ask you that actually about Miracle Sin, because he's talked about it and he's sort of said it's sort of a vampire story, but I'm still not. Like, is it a vampire story or is it just a vampire in it?
Yeah, it's hard to describe that way. I actually picture it. So it's a lot of things. It's definitely like horror, urban fantasy, and the main protagonist is a vampire, but it's not really about, oh, he's a vampire. Like we just find out, oh, that's what the hell he is.
Oh, okay.
But you turn his book into a purse and you get a picture.
Oh, nice.
I can't tell how much I'm blind.
That looks really cool. Is that like the main character?
Yeah, that's Novak. That's the vampire.
Is that a book that you reread often?
I was going to reread last year and I just kept getting shiny object syndrome. I'm probably going to reread it like after this month because I have one more arc and my buddy Jim is putting out a charity anthology and I'm reading for that.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's definitely getting a reread. Plus, it's been a little while, so the details have blurred. So I tend to, when I reread, wait a couple of years.
Yeah. Okay, we have another comment here. Kate, she says that she loves Dracula's by Blake Crouch, which is a really awesome book. That's definitely over the top and kind of crazy. And also The Lesser Dead by Christopher Buehlman, which is on my honorable mentions list here. That book is so well done. Have you read that one?
No, both of them are on my like really want to read list.
Oh God, you're gonna love it. You're gonna love both of them, I think, for different reasons. The Dracula's is way more like a splatterpunk type story, where the Lesser Dead, it does get nasty and gory, but it's more I don't know, it's just not splatterpunk, I don't think. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
kind of veers into that territory, but it's without necessarily being it. But it's still really well done and so entertaining. It takes place in like New York sewers and whatnot, and it's an absolute blast.
That one's been on my list for a while. I have so many little book lists, and at this point, I have one that's like the most wanted vampire books that's in there. And it's another one that like I'll see when people list or they recommend stuff, but I don't actually run into people talking about it.
Which book was that?
The Lesser Dead. That's one like I'll see
Oh,
it when people are like, "Hey, I want a vampire story" or something, and it gets like added to like a list of comments. But I don't really run into like reviews.
yeah. I don't think it's very popular on Book Talk.
Yeah, and I'm finally I'm getting more active on Facebook and IG again because I'm in the States and I don't know how long I'm gonna have book talk.
Yeah,
So
that's got to be upsetting,
it's
especially
annoying.
when yeah, yeah. You could always go to YouTube.
Yeah, I gotta learn YouTube and I'm toying with, but I'm not 100%. I gotta do actual homework. Maybe doing a Substack, but
Yeah.
I'll find something. I like doing this, so I'll find something else.
I have one more honorable mention, and I just want to clarify here that there's probably a ton of books that I just didn't remember that I read that belong on this list because I did forget to put They Live on here. But that one was like hugely important in my life. But my last one is Let Me In by John Edved Linkvist.
Mm.
That book is just so it's messed up on so many levels, not just the fact that there's a child vampire, but there's so much more going on. Did you read that one at all or watch the movie?
No, I saw the American movie
Hmm.
because I know there's the two, but I have not read it. And the movie was quiet enough that honestly I fell asleep, and it wasn't because the movie was boring. It was because I had a toddler, and the movie was quiet.
That having a toddler will help you sleep whenever you can.
Yeah, I could give you a whole list of movies where it's like, oh, but she fell asleep, and it's like, and it had nothing to do with anything, but I sat still.
Or you laid down. When I'm watching a movie with my wife, the second she's gonna lie down on the couch, I'm like, nope, 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 because that's the end right there. You're gonna fall asleep.
Yeah, my husband does horror, but some stuff, if it gets under his skin, it keeps him bothered for a little while.
Yeah.
And I think the worst one I knocked out on him like that from Autopsy of Jane Doe, and he has not forgiven me yet. And I'm like, I still got to find out how it ends.
That's a good movie. I haven't seen it in a
Yeah.
while now. I love it. Do you have any more honorable mentions before we get to, I guess, the final three?
Um, whereas I just read two that like there's Youngblood by Sylvester Barzy, and it's YA, but he really played around with the tropes, and that was a lot of fun. And I haven't reviewed it because I can't do it justice. I'm going to sound like an idiot right now. Like I need to get my adjectives straight, but there's like New York gets quarantined and basically abandoned from the rest of the world. Like there's an outbreak, kind of like a zombie outbreak, but they call them something else. And when they come up with a vaccine, the people who get vaccinated turn into vampires, and then there's a mutation. And then there's reason to believe that the things have gotten smart, so they send in the army.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of fun and a lot different. And I just right now me talking about it is terrible, so that'll get reviewed when I can make sense of it. And Knuckles Supper by Drew Steppick. I
That's
need I need to find somebody who's read it, because his explanation for how vampires started, I threw the damn book.
Threw it for a good reason, or because you're like,
No, it was good. Like,
okay.
it was. I'm like, I don't want to spoil this for people somebody has read it. I just haven't found the person I know that's read it yet.
And what
But
was that one again?
Knuckle Supper.
Knuckles.
It's Splatterpunk. Drew Stepik's the guy that created Godless.
Okay.
Good guy, but it's heroin addicted vampire gang in LA.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, this could be interesting. And it's like, the cover's really gritty and fun. And I picked it up because my friend was like, but what do they call the gang? And I opened the page to see, and the next thing I know, I'm 5 pages in, and I just read it in 24 hours. I just wouldn't put it down.
Yeah.
But it's like you find out right in the beginning, so I feel like it's not a spoiler. They don't have fangs.
They don't have fangs?
No, and then they don't do well when they like the main characters anyway are heroin addicted. They don't shoot up because it doesn't last, so they shoot up a live victim and then rip off whatever limb and drink out of that, and it's crazy. It's
interesting.
Completely nuts.
I like that.
It reads very much like a LA street gang story, and they happen to be vampires.
That kind of makes me think of a song I really like by a metal band called Electric Wizard. It's called The Satanic Rites of Drugula. And the whole song is about a vampire who's addicted to drugs, but he has to feed on junkies and whatnot in order to get high. And so he finds himself kidnapping people and getting them drugged up so he can feed on them. It's an interesting song. Yeah,
that would fit the bill for this.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that was an influence. Who knows?
It could have been.
Yeah. All right, so we're going to move now into our final three, the top three. These are definitely the ones I have listed anyway are I would say my absolute favorite vampire novels. But how about you lead us off?
Okay, with me, it's definitely Memnoch the Devil. Salem's Lot, even though it has been long enough that I'm overdue for a reread. And then I kind of got tied, and it's funny because it's kind of the more modern, gritty, or more gothic academic, and I can never, so it's by mood. The Historian by Elizabeth Kostova, or Bunker Dogs by Gage Greenwood. And I could not narrow it to 3. I was like, 4 is pretty good for me.
Interesting. Bunker Dogs. What's that about?
That is a younger college student is babysitting, and you get alarms and sirens going off outside, and some catastrophic end of the world type event is happening, and the family she's sitting for just happened to have a bunker, so her and the kid go in the bunker, and turns out they're keeping vampires down there.
Nice.
And then you find out that there's something down there that the vampires are scared of.
So if they're scared of something, we should be very scared of them.
Yeah, so there's a lot of real claustrophobic, the vampires are basically caged, so we don't want to let them go, but they can do the telepathic thing, so there's mind games, and there's the problem of, do we risk what's happening in the outside world or stay here? And
yeah. I remember Bunker Dogs was being was pretty popular on both BookTube and Book Talk. It's one of those books I keep meaning to read. I really need, since I wrote it down here, because if it's in your top 3, then I definitely need to read it.
Yeah, it moved pretty quick. It was, you get 2 timelines too on it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the current events, and then you get these flashbacks in the girl's background, which they don't make a lot of sense right at first, and then but the way he pulls everything together was just okay, I'll go with this.
Awesome. All right, so my top three are uh, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And one reason why this is on my list is because it really reminded me of Fright Night, but in modern day suburbia with commentary on women's rights. And I absolutely loved it. Salem's Lot, of course, I've read that one a couple of times, and it's always fun. But I love that movie that you mentioned, the 1979, I think it was, movie adaptation that was serialized on TV. And my top one, I have to go with Interview with the Vampire by Anne Rice, because that one I've read the most, and I just, it kind of goes away. It's almost like these books could have influenced Stephanie Meyer or could have influenced her, because it's based on the vampire's point of view, and of course they're all glamorous and whatnot, and they're all beautiful. But there's just something to the writing and the characters that pull me in every time. I love Louis. I love his sadness. I love how he overcomes his sadness and triumphs in the end. I love Lestat because he's such a little brat who's like always ready to destroy everything just to serve his own needs. And of course, Claudia, the little girl, she's tragic character because she was turned as a child, right? And
also terrifying.
Yeah, and she was a terrifying little child vampire. And it's just such a good story, man. I just absolutely love it. It's very dark too.
I want, like, not from the movie, I want fan art of, there's that scene where Louis and Claudia, this when they find, like, the theater of vampires, and she's curled up with him in, like, the carriage, and I'm like, I want that picture.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, oh, well, you could have it. And it's like, you don't understand. Like, Kirsten Dunst did an amazing job, but she was like 10 or 11, and Claudia's like 4 years old in the books. This is a tiny little doll-sized child doing this.
Yeah. But she did a good job though. But yeah, have you watched the recent adaptation of the Vampire Chronicles on AMC? I think it is.
I want to. I'm really afraid to hate it.
Yeah, I went into it with the same feelings, and I wouldn't say I hated it, but it really doesn't feel like the Vampire Chronicles at all. And so I stopped watching it. It feels like its own thing, and that's fine. It looks great, and the acting's all done very well, but it's just not. It's not what I'm looking for, I guess. The actual the first adaptation was brilliant. I thought it was like almost. It wasn't the book to a T, but it followed it very, very faithfully.
Yeah. Yeah, generally most of the places where they made changes, you could see why.
Yeah.
Versus some stuff, it's like, oh, we took the names and the idea and we made this whole separate thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. So I guess that wraps it up for us. I had a lot of fun talking vampires with you. Thank you for coming on,
Thank
Karen.
you for having me.
And I'm really hoping that we can stay in touch, and I hope that you can just message me more books that I can check out, because that one that you messaged me about, You Can't Take It With You, by Marcus Hawk, that one could have made the top 3, honestly.
Yeah.
That was what I was thinking about when I said, okay, top 3. First one I'm going to add is You Can't Take It With You, and then I was like looking at all the other ones, and it was just like, oh man, I just can't do it.
It's sitting right at the top of my list with mine too. I'm like, but I mean, granted, he's a favorite author of mine anyway, but from getting into Odd Conversations, like, I knew what he liked in A Vampire too, and I was like, he's going to do this really, really freaking well.
Yeah, he did too. Knocked it out of the park. I really loved the themes in there of becoming something else, becoming a feral beast, and then finding your humanity again. It was just so brilliantly done. Like, my God. So well done. It made me, once I read that, I was like, okay, I've got to read The Miracle Sin. The only reason that I haven't, it's like 500 pages, and long books like that tend to frighten me off a little bit, but I've got to make the plunge.
Yeah, it didn't feel as long as it was when I was reading it. Like I love a chunky book, but usually I have to be in the right state. That one, I picked it up, and it starts off a little bit YA because Mason's like 17. You have the I don't know what I'm doing after high school kid.
Mm-hmm.
So you get like a basic introduction and the concept there. He survived. There was an earthquake like 15 years prior, and Jerusalem sank into the earth, and he's the only survivor. So it
Mm-hmm.
kind of covers a little bit of that, but it's just really naturally put into the world. And then he goes to go do some stupid teenage stuff, and all hell breaks loose. And I couldn't put it down except for yelling that, of course, there's a vampire.
All right, before we go, is there anything else you'd like to pimp? Anything that you've got going on, or where people can find you?
With me right now, I'm primarily, I'll stay on TikTok until it's not an option for me because it works for my brain.
Mm-hmm.
But Facebook and Instagram, I know how to work the best until I figure out where I want to be. And everything is MK Oldman. But there is, where did I make sure I wrote it down so I don't screw up her name? I don't know if you've run into Donna Taylor on Book Talk,
Donna
but
Taylor,
we've been mutuals like since I first started. And she is about to do the cover reveal finally for, it's a YA series, but the San Nico Slayers.
Okay.
And the first book will be called Blood on the Boardwalk. And she's another one that like die-hard Lost Boys, so it's going to be very much Lost Boys vibes. And
Nice.
I've been watching her talk about this for 3 years, and it's a 4 or 5 book series. Most of them are done. So like I am sometime this week, hopefully we get to see the new cover.
Nice. Are any of the books out yet, or is
No,
it coming out?
they're just about to start coming out. And
Awesome.
I've been watching video after video on details and decisions for about 3 years now. So I'm like, I'm dying. And if you're a Lost Boys fan too, that's worth checking out.
Well, thank you so much. I'm definitely going to check that out. She's on TikTok, right?
Yeah, and I know IG. I don't think I found her on Facebook.
Well,
I avoided Facebook for so long.
I'm going to look her up and follow her because I want to check out this series. If it's anything like Lost Boys, I have a real soft spot for that. I've read other Lost Boys based horror fiction, things that were influenced by it, and nothing really matches up to the original, but I'm always willing to read more Lost Boys influenced stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for coming and commenting throughout the video. And I want to thank you again, Karen. And you're invited to come back anytime. Just let me know. And bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.